There are three access specifiers: public, private, and protected in C++. So public means that regardless what you have under public, member variables, member methods, this means that all of them could be accessed directly from outside of the class. Okay, so if you have a class defined as, let's say, class X, right? And you can have various different access specifier. First one is public, right? And then second one is private. And the third one is protected. Okay, so you can have various different classed member variables and class methods under each of these, right, specifiers. Private means that any of these under this specifier cannot be accessed directly from outside the class. So we illustrated this previously. There's also another one called protected. This one is a little interesting. So member cannot be accessed from outside of the class, but if you have some sort of inheritance structure, right? So this is the second most important aspect of object-oriented programming. The first one is data encapsulation. Second part is the inheritance. So we'll talk about this later. So if you have an inheritance structure, whereas maybe you have a parent class, right? So this is a parent class. And this parent class has offspring. Let's say this offspring is a child. This child can access, okay, this parent's protected member variables and the methods. Okay, so this is only accessible, meaning any member variables and methods are protected, accessible by that parent's child class, right? Or the child's child, right? You could have multiple, not multiple inheritances by an inheritance structure where you have basically another child inheriting another child, which inherit from this parents. So that said, just remember there are these three these three access modifiers, and then we'll delve into the specifics in the demo. This is a quick Visual Studio Code demonstration here, illustrating a class named based. We have three member variables, ID public, ID private, and ID protected, and they're under three different access specifiers: public, private, and protected. Like I said, anything that is public could be accessible outside of the class. Anything that's private can only be accessible within the class. Anything that's protected can also be accessed by itself, the class itself, or a child, right, of this base class. We'll talk about inheritance later. So let's declare an instance of a base class on the stack and invoke on these variables data members and see what happens. So if we're to print out, and this is outside of the class, an instance of ID public, we should be able to do that. And this should give us a value of 1, right? Now let's change this to ID private and see what happens, right? As you know, this ID private is private to this class, right? So this is using the object to access this ID private, we're gonna get some sort of error, right? This says ID private is a private member base, so you can access it. So let's change it to protected and see what happens. Now we should see the same thing as a private, because you cannot just access your protected member variables outside of the class unless that class itself or B itself is a child of this base class, right? So this illustrates the different data access specifiers in the scopes that they're in. So the same thing applies to methods, right, or member functions as well.